This video deals with a simple wax up. I'm using a dipping technique to do my wax ups. This is a mixture of Renfert Rewax and Yeti Pressy dip in the dipping pot. After the dip, I just readapt the wax with a hot wax knife. I find that gives me a better, more even finish to the wax. And after I've done that, I'm applying the Yeti wax to the margin. You should be able to see the margin through the dip, so you can place this very accurately, just building enough to create a good collar to give the coping some strength. Then once the ground wax has been applied, I create the angle and make sure that it's sealed down to the skirt. We call the skirt the part of the dipping wax that's beyond the margin, and then seal the collar back to the rest of the coping using a nice hot blade. Then I change to my small carver, and the idea here is to gradually carve through the wax. I don't try and cut through in one go. I go over and over, creating a really smooth finish and thinning out the skirt beyond the margin until you can easily see the limit of the margin. Even on the buckle surface where there's no additional wax, I'm going to reduce the skirt slowly, 3 or 4 passes on each section of the margin, so I'm not going to stress the wax. The margin appears really easily on most preparations. Obviously a knife edge is a little bit harder, but then you just thin out a little slower. So once I've gone all the way around and separated the skirt from the coping, just going to take the skirt off. At this stage I haven't tried to remove the coping obviously, and I'm still safe to do some more alteration of the wax. So I did a little bit more work on the margin here around the collar to define the collar and make sure I'm reducing the amount of grinding on the metalwork that I have to do. Then after I've finished with that, check the thickness. You can see through the wax, so you can see how thick it is. I brush over the wax to give a nice shine to it so it appears smooth, and then release it. It did release there, but I didn't know whether the camera picked it up, so I've just taken it off again. Normally I would just take it off once and then place it back on the margin straight away. And there you see a close-up of the margin, close-up of the margin, and this, it stays very accurately adapted to the margin. This little case I'm doing, that was a little lateral abutment. I've also done a pre-miller abutment, now putting a canine pontic on, so I'm just cutting out a little block, just cheap crown wax that I use to form my pontics. I prefer to do this by hand because I find it just as easy as adapting purchased pontics. Fit that into the space and then tack that on with a little bit of my crown wax mixed with sticky wax. Just applying a little bit of extra support there for the porcelain, so that the pontic has got a reasonable size to it, reasonable rotation. Now the sprueing, this is a very old technique that I've been using for years and years and years. I'm just using the Yeti IQ sprue onto the pontics and abutments. Trying to keep these in a nice line. The important part here is that I'm going to adapt these to the copings. Nice hot blade, and then make sure that the pontics are at even length, because I'm going to apply a plastic stick to these to help to strengthen. So the plastic stick goes on, and then reapply the wax to that, and then I'm going to create my spreader bar from Yeti wax, 4mm. Create a little loop. I'm using a pressure vacuum pressure casting machine, so I want to make a nice loop. There it is applied. Ringless casting system. I'm going to cut the end off the loop and replace that with the plastic sprue, and that should just come straight off the model. It carries the relationship between the two abutments really nicely, and I get very, very good results with the fit of bridges since I've been using this plastic spreader bar. And then obviously you can use the loop to sprue some other units here. I've got a few other single units. And once the bridge is placed onto the sprue, you can amend, perfect the underside of the connectors. A little bit of debubblerizer, blow that off, make sure it's nice and dry, and then place the top half of the ringless system in there, and then we're ready to invest. The investment has been mixed in a vacuum mixing machine. This is a Shearer investment, Shearer Fina 2000. I still use a paint technique, so I like to paint the investment onto the inside of the patterns, and then finish by filling up and putting it into a safe place while the timer records the amount of time I need before I can put it into the furnace. And it goes into a hot furnace. This is 750 at the moment. I'll be taking up to 830 for the cast. And then when that's ready, I can put my metal into my IQ casting machine, do a pre-melt. Now you can see the metal in the machine just pre-melting, so it gets to just to liquidus, and then put the ring into the casting machine, close it up, and the vacuum is drawn. Eventually the machine, when the metal gets to the right temperature, the machine will turn over, which drops the metal into the casting, and then the pressure forces it to fill the cast. And this machine gives fantastic. So there goes the casting machine. Pressure comes in, and then obviously devest and finish up. And these are the finished abutments and the finished bridge. We're all looking at CAD/CAM, but I still think there's a lot of time left for traditional waxing techniques, and I hope that you might have enjoyed this video and try using some of those techniques. Thank you for watching.